For 12 years, the most powerful civilization in the galaxy did nothing. They didn't fire, they didn't invade, they just waited. And every other species that faced them eventually surrendered, except humanity. We negotiated, we rationed, we endured, and they mistook that patience for weakness until they tried to starve our children. That was the moment the galaxy learned something terrifying. Humans will negotiate forever, but if you make them watch their young die, they stop negotiating. The galaxy had learned to fear annihilation. The Conclave of Ithra had learned to fear inefficiency. Their founding civilizations had nearly erased themselves in an era so distant that most stellar cartography from that period no longer aligned with current constellations. Entire sectors, once dense with life, had been rendered sterile by weapons whose radiation signatures still whispered in background noise. The Ithra themselves were not born crystalline. They evolved that way. In their prehistory, they had possessed bodies of flesh, soft, vulnerable forms sustained by a world of unstable tectonics and constant stellar flare bombardment. Their early wars had been brutal and brief, fought with biological weapons and atmosphere-stripping bombardments. They won, and in winning, they nearly destroyed their own biosphere. From that self-inflicted near extinction emerged their great correction. They converted their consciousness into crystalline matrices suspended in gravitic harnesses, forms that could endure cosmic radiation, vacuum exposure, geological catastrophe. They became patient. Other ancient species joined them after similar catastrophes. The Ral, who perceived probability as tangible geometry. The Vem, oceanic hive minds who migrated between water-rich worlds. Together they formed the Conclave. Their shared doctrine was simple. Escalation must never again be allowed to spiral. Thus they refined psychological dominance. Instead of war, they applied pressure. Instead of invasion, they waited. You did not conquer a species, you demonstrated inevitability. And eventually, they bowed. Humanity did not enter the interstellar age unified. They entered it fractured. The Alcubierre lattice breakthrough was not discovered by a global government. It was patented by a private aerospace consortium competing with 3 others racing toward the same physics threshold. By the time Earth governments standardized jump regulations, dozens of experimental drives were already in prototype testing. Mars colonization accelerated out of economic rivalry. Titan's helium refineries expanded because corporations feared competitors gaining monopoly. Human expansion was not elegant, it was desperate. That desperation had roots. Human evolution occurred during the Pleistocene epoch, a period defined by glacial advance and retreat. Entire ecosystems vanished within generations. Survival required flexibility, migration, and rapid adaptation. Then came agriculture, and with it plagues. Then industry, and with it mechanized war. Then fossil fuel combustion and climate destabilization. Humanity's baseline psychology formed under constant existential uncertainty. So when the first Conclave vessel appeared, humanity did not freeze. They analyzed, they argued, they prepared. The Conclave hovered in silent defiance of physics. Its surface refracted sunlight like oil on water. When it transmitted, it spoke with a voice that vibrated through bone conduction in every human within range. The Conclave observes. The message triggered global alarm, but after the initial surge of panic, something strange happened. Life continued. Humans went to work. Children went to school. Governments argued over response protocols. Uncertainty was uncomfortable, but it was not paralyzing. The Conclave noticed. The second Conclave ship arrived quietly. Then 3 more. They positioned themselves not as attackers, but as obstacles. Drive interference fields created minor calibration instabilities. Long-range jumps required near-perfect mass-shadow alignment.
The Conclave's subtle gravitational emissions nudged those margins just enough to create risk. No ship was destroyed by Conclave fire. Ships destroyed themselves, attempting misaligned jumps. Insurance corporations halted coverage. Trade slowed. Seoul's GDP dropped 8% in 6 months. Seoul's economists called it external stabilization pressure. The Conclave called it the beginning. They monitored internal human communications. They expected fragmentation. They expected civil unrest. Instead, they saw something statistically unusual: argument, but not collapse. Human news networks filled with outrage. Political factions blamed each other for provoking alien attention. Conspiracy groups insisted secret deals existed. But at the institutional level, coordination increased. Earth shared helium reserves with Mars. Mars shared manufacturing components with Titan. Emergency agricultural research funding tripled. The Conclave's predictive matrices recalibrated. Probability of surrender shifted from year 3 to year 5. They were patient. They could wait.
By year 3, strain was visible. Luxury goods vanished entirely from outer colonies. Terraforming schedules on Ganymede fell behind by 22%. 3 orbital habitats delayed expansion. But humans did not experience pressure as purely destructive. They experienced it as challenge. On Earth, vertical farming megastructures expanded upward across former financial districts. On Mars, regolith processing improved to extract trace elements once considered unusable. On Titan, atmospheric filtration systems were redesigned to capture microparticles previously ignored. Scarcity became a design parameter. The Conclave observed a disturbing trend. Human innovation rates increased under blockade. This contradicted Conclave doctrine. Most civilizations stagnated under pressure. Humans accelerated. The Ithra theorized it was short lifespan psychology. Humans, averaging less than a century per individual, did not defer long-term adaptation across millennia. They acted immediately. Still, the Conclave remained confident. Biological urgency would eventually exhaust them. It always did. The Conclave's most refined tactic was selective relief. Offer one colony trade restoration, watch the others fracture. It had worked for millions of cycles. They approached Titan first. Titan's refineries were critical to human fusion networks. A private Conclave transmission was delivered to Titan's leadership. Recognize Conclave supremacy. Titan trade corridors restored. Titan's governor did something unprecedented. She broadcast the offer publicly. Every human world saw the proposal. Then she responded, "Titan does not stand alone." The message went viral. Across Earth, Mars, Ceres, Europa, Luna, the phrase emerged organically: "We endure together." Conclave sociologists struggled to categorize the phenomenon. Humans bonded to abstractions, to flags, to ideals, to collective suffering. Evolutionary review revealed ancestral tribal bonding behaviors amplified through symbolic cognition. Humans treated their civilization like extended family. The Conclave had never encountered a species whose loyalty extended beyond biological kin at planetary scale. It was irrational and powerful. Probability of fracture dropped to 32%. The vigil extended. Europa had always felt fragile. Not weak, fragile. Beneath kilometers of ice, humanity had carved cathedral cities suspended from the frozen crust like luminous stalactites. Fusion arrays burned warm and golden overhead, mimicking sunlight through diffused atmospheric haze. Below the cities, the abyssal ocean churned in eternal darkness, alien, unexplored, unknowable.
Children born on Europa learned to swim before they learned to walk. Gravity was light, movement was fluid, laughter carried strangely in the domed habitats. It was a place of quiet pride, and it was dependent. Europa's ecosystem could recycle water, oxygen, and biomass with astonishing efficiency, but complex micronutrients and advanced medical compounds still required off-world imports. The colony's margin for error was thin. When the Conclave vessel repositioned along the Europa supply corridor in year 12, it did not announce intent. It simply increased gravitational interference output by 0.7%. That was enough. Cargo vessels attempting to calibrate Alcubierre lattice jumps began reporting micro-instability fluctuations. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that one misalignment could shear a ship across relativistic gradients. Insurance carriers halted coverage within 48 hours. Shipping companies suspended departures. Europa had reserves for 8 months. Rationing began immediately. At first, it was barely noticeable. Slightly reduced portions, delayed luxury imports, tighter energy budgets. Then, nutrient supplements for children were cut to priority-only distribution. Then, hospital pharmaceutical allotments were revised downward. Inside Classroom Dome 7, 6-year-old Alina Reyes sat with her classmates beneath the soft amber glow of artificial sunlight. Their teacher, Mariko Ionescu, tried to keep her voice calm while explaining new ration guidelines.
Your bodies are strong.
She told them gently.
You're explorers. Explorers adapt.
But Mariko had seen the latest growth charts. Children between 5 and 9 were trending below expected development curves. When a journalist from Earth requested a remote interview about life under blockade, Mariko hesitated. Then she accepted. The broadcast showed children behind her, bundled in insulated layers despite climate regulation, because energy was being conserved. Alina stood near the glass, staring upward. Through layers of ice and reinforced composite, faint silhouettes of alien ships could be seen, dark shapes drifting like patient predators. The image spread across human networks in minutes. The Conclave observed the data spike. They categorized it as emotional response. They did not understand its significance.
On Earth, the United Earth Assembly convened under emergency authority. The chamber was circular, suspended above the Atlantic in a transparent dome reinforced against orbital debris and meteor strikes. Beneath the floor, ocean currents shimmered in deep blue patterns. The debate was not theatrical. It was grim. Admiral Lena Call presented casualty projections.
If we engage directly, initial fleet losses could exceed 40%. The Conclave's capital constructs are ancient, heavily shielded. We have numerical advantage in smaller vessels, but not mass.
A representative from Mars countered. If we don't engage, Europa's child mortality rate crosses 3% within 5 months. Silence. 3%. It was a number that sounded small to distant analysts. It was catastrophic to parents. The Conclave had applied pressure across 12 years. Humanity had absorbed it, adapted, negotiated. But the starvation of children was not strategic inconvenience. It was existential trigger. Human neurobiology responded to offspring threat with overwhelming hormonal cascades. Adrenaline, cortisol, oxytocin interplay that synchronized group behavior under crisis. Historically, tribes that failed to defend their young did not persist. Admiral Call spoke again.
Operation Hearthfire has been prepared for 7 years. Activation requires unanimous authorization.
The vote was called. Every delegate stood. Unanimous. Across the asteroid belt, encrypted signals transmitted in bursts too short for conclave interception. Reactor cores long dormant began to warm.
Asteroid 492A was officially listed as depleted. Internally, it was hollow.
Kilometer-wide chambers carved through carbon rock housed rows of matte black hulls suspended in magnetic cradles. Human warships were not beautiful. They were functional. Angular plating optimized for deflection, railgun spines running the length of their dorsal surfaces, compact fusion cores shielded by redundant containment layers. No glowing insignias, no ceremonial architecture, only intent. Across dozens of hollowed asteroids, identical scenes unfolded. Technicians who had pretended to be miners for years stepped back as power flowed through dormant systems. Shipboard AIs initialized simultaneously, syncing across quantum-linked communication lattices. Admiral Cowell's voice transmitted across every vessel.
Europa corridor priority, disable blockade nodes, minimize civilian collateral damage. Move!
Asteroid surfaces fractured open. Thousands of ships surged outward like a swarm released from stone. The Conclave's long-range sensors registered energy spikes. Their predictive matrices faltered. Human industrial output under blockade had been modeled as insufficient for major fleet expansion. They had miscalculated diversion capacity. Humans had been building quietly for 12 years.
The Conclave blockade vessel above Europa was an Ithra construct nearly 6 kilometers long. Its crystalline lattice refracted starlight into fractal patterns across its hull. It did not anticipate immediate assault. The first human rail strike hit its drive core at 0.87 light seconds. Kinetic slugs traveling at relativistic fractions punched through shield harmonics not tuned for saturation impact. Within 3 seconds, 17 additional strikes followed from distributed vectors. The Conclave vessel attempted to reconfigure shields. EMP cascades detonated across its surface. Human ships did not form a line. They attacked from every angle simultaneously. Within 11 minutes, the blockade ship's drive core destabilized. It went dark. Cargo ships waiting at safe distance initiated jump calibration instantly. Within 27 minutes, Europa's supply corridor reopened. The Conclave had never experienced a vigil collapse so abruptly. They initiated escalation protocols. Deep space reinforcement fleets altered trajectory toward Sol. Humanity had crossed from negotiation to war.
Conclave reinforcement constructs entered Sol like moving cathedrals. Vast hulls adorned with gravitic spires, unfolded weapons dormant for millennia. Energy lances carved molten scars through asteroid clusters. Human ships detonated in brilliant arcs of plasma. But humanity did not retreat. They swarmed. Small attack vessels operated in coordinated packs, sharing targeting data in real time through quantum mesh. When one ship fell, its tactical data transferred instantly to the next. Human commanders did not pursue honor, they pursued effect. Drone clouds flooded shield grids, overloading harmonic frequencies. Rail batteries fired in staggered patterns designed to induce shield oscillation failure. On the second day, Admiral Kahl authorized sacrificial vector strikes, deliberately overloading fusion cores in proximity to Conclave weapon nodes. Human losses mounted, entire flotillas vanished, but Conclave casualties exceeded any conflict since their founding. Within the Conclave's shared consciousness, alarm propagated. This was not ritualized dominance. This was parental fury weaponized through industrial scale. On the third day, Conclave predictive matrices reached unacceptable probability thresholds. Continuation of engagement risked destabilizing regional power balance. Withdrawal was calculated as optimal. Their fleets disengaged. Human vessels did not pursue beyond Sol's outer boundary. They held position, watching.
The Conclave transmission arrived without ornament. The dominance vigil concludes. Humanity is recognized as autonomous sovereign entity. Further pressure deemed inefficient.
On Earth, there was no cheering, only exhale. On Europa, cargo ships descended through ice corridors, delivering medical supplies. Alina Reyes received full nutrient restoration within hours. Hospitals stabilized. Across human worlds, memorial ceremonies lit orbital skies with silent flares. The hidden fleet did not power down. It expanded. Shipyards, once concealed, were formalized. Defense doctrine shifted permanently. Patience would remain, but it would never again be unarmed.
Within Conclave archives, a new classification entered doctrine. Volatile endurers. Defined as species evolved under chronic environmental instability, exhibits prolonged tolerance to systemic stress, displays non-linear escalation upon offspring threat. Engagement requires extreme caution. Younger Conclave envoys studied the soul engagement as case analysis. Their conclusion was uncomfortable. They had mistaken patience for weakness. In reality, patience had been stored momentum. Humanity continued negotiating in galactic forums. They traded, they collaborated, they smiled. But every Conclave strategist knew, if a vigil were ever considered again, one variable must be assessed first. Are there children involved? Because humans will negotiate forever, but if you make them watch their young starve, they stop negotiating. And when they stop, they do not wait.